I took yesterday off from skateboarding just to give my legs a little bit of rest. There's a lot of confused muscles and ligaments right now, just because it's a new way to balance and a new way to move. Makes perfect sense. But I am not interested in pushing it until I injure myself. Because it's one thing to hurt myself in the process of learning, and another thing to just hurt myself because I didn't know when to quit. So like learning when to quit in a given training session, no matter what the activity is such a crucial thing to do. I see a lot of climbers overdo it, and I am glad I haven't done that yet. Skating. Dusk is a really good way to sort of make sure there's a limit on your session, because once it's dark, it's a pretty clear exterior indication that you should be done. So I think, dusk has a nice clock that it puts on this stuff. So what I'm trying to do now is learn the switch stance, which is my right foot in the middle of the board and my left foot on an end. If you think about it like that, it's almost easier. If my direction of travel is that way, then I'm set up to do what's called a nollie, nose ollie. And if my direction of travel is that way, then I'm set up to do a switch ollie, which is the same motion with my body mirrored. So that's what I'm teaching myself right now. Just want to get that symmetrical coordination that is so crucial for making this thing work, no matter what direction I'm going, no matter what position I find myself on the board. I have this one bag of tricks, which is to say the same abilities and options, which is really cool, because I think what's the most interesting format of skating that I've discovered is flat ground street skating. I'm not super into the freestyle aesthetic or the way the boards look. I really like doing tricks with this kind of board, and then I'm sure I'm going to really enjoy skate parks because they're well curated and they're designed for a given purpose, which is this one. But mostly flat ground. I don't think big stairs or rails or anything are that enticing to me. I think little ledges and like manual pads and maybe like little ramps. But honestly, for me right now, I just want to get this sense of flow that comes from riding. Okay, I figured out today's drill by how little I want to do it. I just need to practice pushing and riding on flat ground. And so much of that has to do with actually having good balance on the leg that's on the board, so that this leg is just adding speed and not ever being leaned on. And pretty simple in mechanics and pretty hard to accomplish, but it feels like slackline because it's balanced this way, oriented to my body on one foot. This kind of thing, that is what you're doing when you're pushing on a skateboard, if your foot is oriented in the most optimal way, because you want your back foot to just step on and go right to the tail, the back of the board as it rolls along the ground. One thing I've learned is that this is a 7.5 inch wide board, which is pretty narrow among skateboarders. It's also an Amazon special, so I didn't get a huge deal on it by buying it secondhand anyway, but I didn't support Amazon. And that there is actually a little bit of a difference in shape. Tail, nose, it's very subtle, but it's a taper thing. Right around here, the corners are a bigger radius here and a tighter radius there. Anyway, let's practice pushing.
Comically worse with that. So we're just gonna do left leg for a while. A bunch of rabbits keep me company here.
If you have ever wondered why someone would bother doing pistol squats, it's that right there. Not only being able to balance at any elevation, but being able to correct and find enough motion. It literally feels exactly like this. Counterweight, constantly counterweight. Everything's counterweight. I need to train those. It's so stressful. I don't feel like I'm gonna biff it and just hurt myself, but at the same time, you have to keep up. There's no hesitation. There's no halfway doing something like that. Especially when you're at a speed that's faster than you can walk. You're either on the train or you're off. Yeah. Single leg squat strength is a absolute foundation of like flat ground skating at the very least, but I imagine it is equally beneficial to all. So there's the squat stability strength, which is just about body weight. There's the popping, which is obviously about body weight, but equally about coordination and timing. You can have plenty of power, but if you deploy it at the wrong part of the curve, then you're not taking advantage of the mechanical effort to at least full advantage. So there's the consideration for truck tightness, right? So as soon as I started pushing, really moving quickly, this thing is so twitchy because the trucks are so soft, which means now that I'm steering with my foot more or less pointed forward, the lateral ankles are doing a lot more things. Suddenly, like, this part of my leg, the outside and the inside, have to like tighten to keep the pronation like really well calibrated, because this motion, there's a lot more strength built into this. There's these levers. So when you're steering this way, it's easier to correct. This, yeah, hard. Let's try a couple more while I sell a little light. So I think my particular knack is for exhaustive detail, even when it's not required. So one thing I just realized is that my focal point, like my eyes, they were glancing down at my foot to make sure I was standing. I was screwed in the spot. And like, obviously the anxiety is that there's stuff in the road to run over, but bringing my focal point up to the pavement right in front of me and just trusting that my foot is gonna go where it's supposed to go, ground and then back to the board, is a habit I have to form. And if you haven't considered it, it's definitely how you get moving. Can't be looking down, you know, can't be focused down here. You gotta be focused where you're going. I know that's intuitive, but it's also nice to remember that to look out for it when you're skating, because your brain is in a different mode, right? I'm feeling it working. I'm feeling stuff happening. You know, it's not like you're breaking open an egg and there's a treasure inside, but that's not really how any of this works, is it? It's like you're chipping away at a mountain. But sometimes you strike a vein, and that can be cool. I'm gonna pause for the train. One thing that has become apparent to me over the last few days is how much getting on this skateboard and proving to myself that if I actually just tried, it would go better than I expected, has been tremendously powerful for my mental health in so many other categories. And this is something I say about climbing all the time, and it's just as true about music and skateboarding. It's about proof of concept more than anything. With creative acts like these, like in climbing, I remember thinking, man, I can't imagine how anyone does anything harder than V5. but then you see people do it. And then you're struck with the notion that maybe you didn't actually have it figured out. Maybe it's different than you thought. And that's the game for me. I need reminders. I need metaphorical activities like skating and climbing specifically. They're so fun to do, and they're so rewarding, and they put me in the flow state so easily, and that's the dream. But the way they fit into my life is that they remind me that if I just tried, I can do it. Because there's a lot of other things that need doing, than skating and climbing. A lot bigger fish to fry that make these fish tastier. You know what I'm saying? Okay, that's enough philosophy. I'm gonna try this drill again. I don't need to stop it. Down and back again. I always come up with something I want to say on my laps, and that's a fun way to vlog. I hate that word, but that's what I'm fucking doing, isn't it? So, damn it. Did I really lose it? Did I really? Yep, see ya. Ooh, I remember. It strikes me that I like that I'm learning to skate in the middle of a street because there's an insurance policy on my conscience. I don't want to strike a car with my skateboard, and I haven't yet, and I don't think I will because I'm so cautious about it. It's pressurizing a little bit. Like if this was a big open parking lot, or even better yet, a skate park, where there was nothing I was trying to avoid doing, I might be a little more reckless, thereby injure myself with this board a little more. I'm clearly not overly cautious because I'm fucking trying to skateboard at 29 years old. But, having a container is in some sense a really good thing. Keeps you... Skateboarding is so therapeutic for my anxiety of being in the way or otherwise being a nuisance to people. Because in a very gentle way, I'm a nuisance by just being out here. But in a grander sense, what it's doing for my psychology is huge. It's also good practice for improvisation. In this case, it's improvisation of movement, but that's about presence, right? That's about living in this exact moment and making sure I'm keeping up with this moment. Otherwise, I'm gonna biff. I just spent like 3.5 hours locked in my kitchen recording a song. And I don't know how many takes I did. But it got real dark. I got way into the weeds and incredibly down on myself and loud and obnoxious, and I'm not the only person that lives in my house, and I feel bad about it. But I feel really stuck because we're in quarantine, So I gotta find a way to be authentic that pays respect to the people I share space with. And imagine if we thought about sharing space not just with the people we live in an apartment with, but like our building, our block, our neighborhood, our city, our state, our country, maybe even the planet. What the hell, right? How do you pay respect to all that? How do you live in a way that truly respects that whole ecosystem? I don't know, but damned if skateboarding doesn't help me think about it. It's weird. I agree.